Welcome, guys, to the first Cord underscore movie reviewer review. God, that's so cringy. And today we are discussing the 2022 Thor Love and Thunder movie, directed by Taika Waititi. I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce his name, and I'm not going to even try. Interesting fact, this is the first Marvel character to get a fourth movie in his own name. But before we continue, if you have not seen this movie yet, no worries. The first half of this review will be completely spoiler-free. If you aren't worried about spoilers, stick around for the second half where I delve into a little bit more spoiler territory. Now, one of the first things I will say about this movie is that visually, it looks alright. While there wasn't anything that blew my socks off or left my mouth wide gaping open, there are plenty of unique set pieces that makes this movie fun to look at. I mean, it's a $250 million Marvel movie. What else can you expect at this point? The same can be said for most of the action. While there's some really good scenes, most of it falls under your stereotypical over CGI'd Marvel fights that we've been watching for the past 15 years. Not to say that's a bad thing per se, there's just not as much unique action scenes, sequences, or camera shots compared to something like Thor Ragnarok that really was creative in some of its shots. Now, speaking of Thor Ragnarok, if you were expecting a sequel in terms of the same or similar quality of it, you will be surely disappointed. The only thing these two movies share, honestly, is the same director. Thor Love and Thunder really struggles as an entertaining movie through a couple things. First, an overuse of cheesy third-grade humor, and secondly, a plot riddled with plot holes and character inconsistencies. Not to say this movie is not funny at all, there are moments that are guaranteed to get a slight chuckle from you, but when the funniest part of your movie is a pair of goats that when they bleat trigger the Pavlovian response society has conditioned us to laugh whenever we hear funny goat noises, your movie's comedy has a problem. In preparation for this movie, I decided to rewatch Ragnarok for the first time in quite a while, and one aspect I think a lot of people forget about that movie is that at its heart, it really isn't a quote-unquote comedy. Most of its scenes take itself seriously, and the humor comes from either the irony of the said situation or a funny line given at the end to tie off the scene. There are very few, if any, scenes that exist in that movie for the sole purpose of comedy. In Thor Love and Thunder, rather than having comedic lines and bits break up the more serious elements of the story, it does the exact opposite, using serious moments to break off the elongated comedy bits, and it just doesn't work anywhere near as well. Wrapping up, there is some enjoyment to be had from this movie if you turn your brain off and just laugh along with the movie and enjoy the action and drama that is there. However, if you at all try and think about this movie's logic or its standing in the grander MCU library, it really falls apart and any rewatch becomes less enjoyable. I honestly would not recommend seeing it in theaters, it's just not that good. Wait a few months and watch it for free from the comfort of your living room if you have a Disney Plus membership. I give this movie a 6 out of 10. Now, if you haven't seen the movie yet and would like for it to remain unspoiled, please leave now, as we're going to be beginning to discuss some spoilers. Welcome to the spoilers section. At least for this movie, I'm just going to be talking about a couple of the plot holes and inconsistencies this movie has and a couple final thoughts. Take, for instance, Gorr. As a character and a villain, I think he has one of the best premises in the MCU. A former worshiper of a god who's been screwed over by his god, losing everything he has in sacrifice for him. He just has an interesting backstory, because in a universe of gods and heroes, the MCU very rarely takes a moment to look over some of the people that are actually screwed over by them. However, his character lacks real motivation for most of his actions. Gorr only had reason to kill that one fruit god or whatever in the very beginning of the movie, not to go after all the gods in the universe, innocent or otherwise. If you want to argue that the sword was corrupting him, basically forcing him to kill all those gods, okay, well, two problems arise. One, why did the sword want to kill all of the other gods in the first place? The MCU doesn't really have any other big baddie right now, because Thanos was killed a couple years ago, and the sword just kind of pops into existence and is destroyed by the end of the movie, and there's no real broader connection of why did this sword want to kill all the gods in the first place? It just kind of existed. And secondly, If the end goal of the sword was to unlock infinity, and the key to infinity was the Bifrost, which only Thor had through his hammer, then why did Gorr go after any other gods? Like, he should have just beelined straight towards Thor and grabbed the hammer and not gotten distracted with killing other gods. It just doesn't make sense. While Christian Bale gave a great performance, his character just falls to have any sort of logicalness to him, I suppose. Another thing that doesn't make any sense is the dichotomy of Mjolnir and Jane Foster. First, what made Jane worthy? In early MCU, being worthy of holding Mjolnir was a monumental achievement. Like, Captain America wasn't even worthy until Endgame, and he had saved the world like 35 times over, risking his own life many times. What has Jane done? Wrote a book on black holes? Be Thor's girlfriend? I just don't buy it. And if you want to argue that the hammer only chose her because Thor had told it to protect Jane at all costs, that doesn't make sense either, as the movie makes it clear the hammer was taking away her mortal strength, allowing her cancer to kill her quicker. And I don't know about you, but slowly killing a loved one isn't what I call protecting them at all costs. There's a lot more that you can point out about this movie, but I think I've proven my point. It's really unfortunate, as I really enjoyed Ragnarok, but it's just nowhere near as good. I think one of the clearest examples of the different philosophies of these two movies is their short theatrical show. In each movie, the characters of the movie walk in on a theater performance from the previous movie. In Ragnarok, the performance and its comedy is used to show how Loki, acting as Odin, has been so egotistical that has weakened the rule of Asgard. In Love and Thunder, it only exists for a laugh. Even though there's much more that can be said about Love and Thunder, these movie reviews are supposed to be somewhat easier to make, so I'm gonna just end this review here. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed my analysis, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you'd like to support me financially, my Patreon is listed below, where you could have a say in my next movie review. With all that being said, I'm Cord Gamer, and I'll see you next time.